everybody. I'm Nicki Pritchard from Anderson Quigley, and thank you for joining me today. So we're here to talk about Nottingham Trent University's win at the Times Higher Education Awards 2020 for the Outstanding Support for Students Awards. And I'd like to introduce the panel from NTU. So we have Sarah Bustard, she's the Student Health and Wellbeing Manager from Student Support Services. Hi, Sarah. Hi. We have Katrina Daoud, the Project Officer Sexual Violence in the Student Support Services. We've got Zoe Mallett, the VP Community and Welfare for NTU Students' Union, and Tessa Knight, NTU's Student Representative. So thank you again for joining, and congratulations on the award. I know it was quite some time ago, and even longer ago when you submitted the application, and obviously a lot has happened over the past year that's had huge impacts on the programs that you've been delivering. So I thought it would be really good to start with an overview. So perhaps if you could give us an overview of the initiatives that contributed to the win of the award.
Sure. So we have really an overview or like a variety of activities and campaigns that all kind of tie into our university and student unions initiatives to really prevent sexual violence from happening in the first place, to raise awareness about the support that we can offer our students, and to also make sure we're providing a really empathetic and respectful support to our students. So I think, all of these initiatives kind of contributed to what made our application stand out. And some of those really include our partnership with the student union, which Zoe will talk about a little bit later during this interview. We have a robust consent program that we offer our students that's quite recent. We have a 3-tier staff training program for our staff who to be able to respond to students. And we also do a survey where we actually, every couple of years, we assess our campus and ask our students about their experiences and knowledge of our support. So I think that's just kind of a quick and brief overview, I think, of what we kind of have created that's brand new that I imagine was quite impressive and is impressive to all of us, really. Does anybody have anything to add on that? No?
No, I think that's great, Katrina. That gives us a good overview. So if we talk about the partnerships a little more, perhaps one of you could give me an overview of why it was important for NTU to partner with the NTU Students' Union and the Consent Coalition, and how those collaborations have actually benefited the programs that you've been running.
Yeah. It is really important for the Students' Union and the university to be partnered around the sexual violence work that we're doing. It ensures that it's all relatable to students, and we gain feedback and contribution from the students, which is essential to engage the right audience. So within the workshops we've worked with students to create realistic and appropriate myths and scenarios to engage with students. And for several years now, NTU and NTSU have collaborated with a Sexual Violence Awareness Week, which this year included some very brave student survivor stories as blogs, consent workshops for students, bystander intervention workshops to help students know how to safely intervene to prevent sexual violence happening. It also included staff disclosure training, peer-led support group run by our mental health champions around sexual health and consent, a panel discussion about what happens when you report sexual violence, with members from the police, CPS, the Topaz Centre, and the local Sexual Violence Support Centre. We've also launched our Survivor Support Network for those students who have experienced sexual violence to share tips and advice with each other moving forwards. We've also hosted our own Trent Denim Day, involving students getting involved. So students were posting photos on Instagram, on Facebook of them in their denim, to show support of any victims of sexual violence. And many staff also got involved, which was great to see. And the overall week had record-breaking attendance compared to previous years, and it just proves how important it is to continue the work for both students and staff and collaborate that. And NTSU also created some new consent videos surrounding peer pressure, dating apps, and coercion, which was viewed by thousands of students and shared through the Consent Coalition as well, to reach a further wider audience around Nottingham.
That's a lot of work, Zoe. So perhaps if we talk about the training programs a little bit more, what kind of numbers of staff and students have been through the training courses so far?
So I actually just looked that up before this meeting, and I hadn't done an overall view of numbers, which is really exciting because I think most of our work really began 2018. So we've offered training to 435 staff since then, and that's in our face-to-face model. We've done a couple hundred more in our online training, so looking at around 600 staff. And for students, we've offered some kind of training, whether it's been in an online form or our consent program, to 1,192 students since the program began, which Sarah's probably like, wow, because I hadn't looked at that number either. So it's been, and a lot of that has really come down to our partnership working and helping raise awareness of events and workshops and things like that.
That's amazing numbers. And are you intending to start scaling this further? And what would you say the biggest learnings from this current training have been for you?
So in terms of scaling it further, yes, we're really pleased to actually say we've been successful in having the go-ahead of implementing mandatory consent sessions for all students that are enrolling at NTU, starting from September. So the consent workshops were created in collaboration of NTU and NTSU, and they're delivered by trained staff and student volunteers. So it's again that collaboration between the Students' Union, students and staff, which is excellent. And we regularly receive student feedback from the workshops to ensure that it's engaging and educating for students and relevant. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we were able to quickly react and move the workshops to an online alternative, keeping the engagement by using the whiteboard function on Teams and various polls. And the easy adaptation to online workshops meant that there was minimal pause and delay for the work that we're doing towards preventing sexual violence. And the ease of an online workshop will have a huge benefit moving forwards, especially being able to do more workshops more accessible for students. So, for example, not all students have come back to campus, and we've still had students being able to partake from across the UK and across the world. So moving forward, we're also looking to implement, myself and NTU are looking to implement an anonymous reporting system for students who do experience sexual violence. So this is a reporting system which will be linked to the police to ensure perpetrators are put on police's radar and will be able to help build a realistic picture of what types of attacks are happening and where. It'll also encourage a true representation of sexual violence in the student population and influence our work going forwards to be more targeted and more beneficial to students. So yes, we're definitely working on scaling it further.
And the biggest learnings around that, what would you say they've been so far?
I'd say the biggest learning is probably having the students' engagement and involvement with the whole work. So getting the student feedback as to what actually happens and how students feel and how they interact with other students. It's really crucial to get a true understanding and also making materials that students find engaging. Talking about sexual violence isn't always fun, so making sure students are engaged in that and learning and wanting to educate themselves and others on it is crucial with the work.
Well, it's probably a great time to ask you, Tessa, as the student representative, from your perspective, how have these programs had an impact?
I think they've had a huge impact. I mean, when you enroll to university, you're enrolling more to just a course. It's community, somewhere you want to feel heard, somewhere you want to sort of feel safe. And I think what Nottingham Trent have done really well is offering things at all different levels. So like Zoe touched on during Sexual Violence Awareness Week, not only was it coming from, you know, the staff details, the staff information of how to get in contact with support, but it was a panel so you can get different perspectives. And then it's also those student offerings such as communities, such as societies. So whether that's the Feminist Society, whether that's the Survivor Support Network, there's so many ways you can kind of get involved. And it's about making it clear there isn't one way that fits all. There's different paths, there's different ways to get support. So I mean, in my experience, when I sort of had something I was passionate about, when I wanted to get involved with support, I emailed Kat and instantly she could put me into contact with different people that had similar interests. And it's about sort of feeling like you belong, feeling like you're a part of that community that's really important. And I think Trent's done an incredible job.
And how do you think the engagement from the wider student body has been?
I think that is something that's constantly growing. It's absolutely there. Again, like Zoe touched on, making consent workshops mandatory from September, that was actually a student suggestion that was voted on by students, making it clear there is this student voice, and it is something that's being listened to. And I think that alone will change engagement hugely, because it's making consent sort of a more normalised conversation. It's sort of chipping away at the taboo that's currently there. And it's sort of allowing people to understand it's okay to talk about, it's okay to sort of learn why it's important. And I think just that alone will massively change how people offer support to each other as well as through the university. But I mean, even with the SU, students can apply to create their own communities. There's constant ways and students can have their voice. And I do think that is something I've seen grow massively over the last 4 years.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to talk about the COVID impacts. We can't ignore those, obviously, and the lack of face-to-face for students this year has likely had quite an impact on the progression of these programs. Does one of you want to speak to that, please?
Yeah, I mean, Nikki, I think this year has been exceptional for lots of reasons, completely unprecedented, and in terms of staff and students, their ability to cope with all kinds of things has been tested to the maximum, I think. So, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that the impact of COVID has been a national thing, hasn't it? It's not just been about NTU. So I think what has helped us is our really strong partnership with local organisations. So in Nottingham, I think I've not seen a stronger partnership within a local authority of statutory sector, NHS, service providers, students, unions, both universities that come together as part of our sexual violence partnership, so that we all understand what each other are working with, what we're dealing with, what our service can look like in this, and all be really reactive to what's going on the ground, responding to what people need, and trying to build that. So the partnership has enabled us to do that and kept our information for students as accurate as possible as services do change to cope with COVID. So I think hugely challenging. But what we've seen is, and I hope what's come across even in this, is really from our student body, from our student union, and from our staff, what we have at Trent is massive passion for this area of work and a huge will to make it work no matter what's going on. And just huge kudos to everybody on the call and everybody who's been involved with us for really working hard to make this happen. So what we've seen is, when we imagine that students might struggle to tell us about their experiences remotely, as they haven't, our numbers have remained stable. We've managed to push and adapt all of our programmes to an online forum. And in some cases we've seen, especially with Sexual Violence Awareness Week, we've seen students being able to access those sessions and the preventative work in a way that they've not before. So they can log on, they don't have to have their camera on. If they want to do that completely anonymously, that's completely fine. They don't have to be in a room and think that accessing something about sexual violence support says something about them, or that they need to disclose anything. So I think it's, in some ways, it's really opened up the ability for people to get involved. So I think, yes, it's hugely challenging, and I think students are in a very difficult situation in terms of accessing their courses, their mental health, and the impact of COVID across the board. So it's really important to try to keep those networks open so that they can tell us and come forward for support, and we're seeing that they are. So that's great. So I think also the thing about the Teams calls really is that we've been really reactive. We can get back to people really quickly, and they can see your face remotely instead of taking a call or just receiving an email. So we've really worked to make that as as friendly and accessible as possible for students, Nikki.
That's really good to hear, and I completely see how much of the work you're doing actually is probably much easier for people to access because it is virtually, and actually it's a positive from what has been such a disastrous year for so many. Well, thank you. That was all really interesting. I think the work that you're doing is very important, and it was a well-deserved win for your team, a really great accolade, and I wish you all the best as you develop the programs into the future in what will be post-COVID HE. Thanks very much, all of you.
Thanks, Nicki.
Thank you.
Okay.